Welcome back into Chicago Sports Tonight Daily. Lou Canellis with you. All right, let's bring in my buddy from Fox Sports 1, part of First Things First, Danny Parkins. Hey, Danny, let's get right into it about that Bears-Commanders game. What did you learn about the Bears, the team, in Monday's winner before we get into specifics?
I thought that was Ben Johnson's signature moment so far as the head coach of the Bears. We talked about it a bit last week, Lou. The run offense and the run defense. Like, let's start with the run defense, because that was the one that you and I were both pretty skeptical about. Washington came into that game leading the NFL in yards per carry. The Bears came into that game 32nd in the NFL in yards per carry against. After that game, Washington had its worst yards per carry game of the season, and the Bears had their best yards per carry against game of the season. Like, that is a very impressive thing. And I know that's more Dennis Allen than Ben Johnson, but the point is, like, they got better during the bye at something that you and I didn't think they had much of a path towards getting better at. And it was arguably DeAndre Swift's best game as a Bear when Washington's defense looked like they had a pretty significant advantage in that area as well. So the penalties were still there. Caleb was still inconsistent. We'll get into all of it. But, like, the Bears got better at weaknesses during the bye, and they figured out a way to get a one-score win. So I thought there was a ton to be happy about against the game against Washington.
I am so happy you brought that up to start this segment, because I was thinking the same thing. My next question was, hey, Ben Johnson and his staff, and I say his staff, Danny, with incredible respect towards guys like Dennis Allen, who you referenced, Richard Smith, who is 70 years old this weekend, but is coaching linebackers, and we saw them make that move with T.J. Edwards and Tremaine Edmonds that I thought was one of the big reasons behind stopping Washington's run game. I think we also need to give a tip of the cap, and yes, for sure to Ben Johnson, but to his assistant coaches as well.
Yeah, right. And so I think Ben Johnson was just kind of more of a placeholder there for the coaching staff, because I mean, think about just last year. And I know this is not something that Ben Johnson wants to do to look back, but you and I can do it. Like, Matt Eberflus took the fall for some things that Shane Waldron and his offensive staff were responsible for. Now, obviously, Waldron got fired before Eberflus, but, like, ultimately that was on Matt Eberflus. Like, when the Bears justified firing Eberflus, part of it was the offensive coaches didn't do enough to get more out of Caleb as a rookie. So, like, Ben Johnson gets credit for the hires that he made for his defensive staff. So I was kind of using him as like an overall catch-all for the coaches, but your specifics are absolutely worth pointing out. And T.J. Edwards, I think, individually does deserve credit for it. And we'll see what happens when Grady Jarrett comes back. But I was impressed that two huge weaknesses that were not quarterback related both improved with time off against a tough opponent. So I just, in a macro sense, I thought it was very encouraging.
And now the job of the coaching staff is to keep the play at the level that we saw Monday night, and not to give us what we saw last year, and that was, a team go on a run and then lose 10 in a row.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. Really interesting opportunity, and you and I will be able to chronicle it together all year, but, like, if the Bears just hold serve over the next month and beat the teams they're favored against, we will be talking about a 6-3 Bears team. Like, beat the Saints, lose to the Ravens with Lamar back out of the bye, beat the Bengals, beat the Giants. All of a sudden, you're 6-3 if you keep improving incrementally, if Caleb keeps getting better, if they keep buying in with Ben Johnson, if whatever issues come up, their coaching staff solves. Right now, they're a 2-1 underdog, 2.5-1 underdog to make the playoffs. If we're talking a month from now and they're 6-3, they'll be a favorite to make the playoffs. So that was the other part about what I thought about that game against Washington, was like, how they won the game mattered a lot less than the fact that they just won the game. Because if they would have lost, fallen to 2-3, lost the tiebreaker with Washington, it would have been very tough to see a path for this team to make it to the playoffs. But now I think it's a real conversation.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you brought that up, and I love those numbers, those odds. Hey, when I see guys playing hurt, like Darnell Wright, who's literally had a torn ligament in his right elbow, or a DJ Moore, all right, who spent the night in a D.C. hospital, but, man, he was out there for 60 of 64 offensive snaps. In my opinion, I think, man, maybe the most important angle that's happening at Hallis Hall right now is that through 5 games, players have bought in to the point that they'll play hurt.
Yeah, I think that there is some truth to that. And I also that you've been around the NFL long enough to know that that's not a given for everybody. But I do think, in my experience anyway, it is the expectation. It's different than other sports. In baseball, you get 162 of them. And so one of them doesn't matter that much. 10 of them doesn't even matter that much. In basketball, you get 82. So 1 or 5 of them don't matter that much. In football, these guys work out and stay in shape and talk to nutritionists and do the sports science and do the 2-a-days and do the off-season work and do the weight room and do the leg press and do everything for 17 Sundays. So for guys to miss games, it's got to take a real thing. And, DJ Moore, glad it sounds like it's not as serious as it may be indicated, but Darnell Wright does deserve a spotlight there. Like, I thought Darnell Wright had one of his best games as a Bear, and I thought he was a huge part of the reason why DeAndre Swift got going, and they need it. Like, they need him to play like the guy that they passed on Jalen Carter for. Like, they need him to be great, and he was on Monday.
All right, I need to get your thoughts on the Cubs. And Jed Hoyer at a press conference today, and I know you're a big Cub fan, and you at Craig Counsell, I have been friends for many years. I want to talk about, first, losing the series to Milwaukee. 2-part question. Number one, my opinion, the better team won the series. And number two, as I advance the story, would the Cubs be down 2-0 in the series against the Dodgers going up against Snell and Yamamoto?
Yeah, the first part is easier for me to answer. Like, I agree with you. I think the better team won, and the bigger question that Jed and Craig have to solve for is, like, why are the Brewers the better team? Like, why are the Brewers, who spend less money, who lost their general manager, who lost their manager, who, lost one of their aces, who has had star turnover, like, why are they the better team? And that's what they get paid a ton of money for, that they have to solve for. Would the Cubs be doing better against the Dodgers? I don't know. The Dodgers, to me, like, the Brewers were the best team in baseball this season. But if you would have said, and the Vegas odds reflected this for the vast majority of the year, like, who's the best team in baseball, I would say it was the Dodgers.
All right, I want you to listen to a couple of bites I'm going to play here. First of all, here's Jed Hoyer today on if he regrets not getting a starting pitcher at the trade deadline.
When I think back on the most obvious thing that people talk about when we were starting pitching at the trade deadline, and honestly, like, I haven't really thought about that much since early August, because I know what the market was. I know how tight the starting pitching market was. I know to acquire players I thought could impact a pennant race, it would have cost us players that impacted our second half in a big way on the team. And so certainly there's moves going back years that you think about in terms of how you can continue to get better. And I think that, my job is to just keep getting better at this job every single year. So of course I think about that. But when it comes to the trade deadline, I don't, just because I know what the market was, and I know what the prices were. And I also know that other teams weren't able to acquire that kind of pitching talent either.
All right, he didn't, but all us media guys did, and we talked about it when this team was short a solid starting pitcher in that Brewers series. So he didn't make a deal because the asking price was too high. And we're going to find out if holding on to guys like Kevin Alcantara and Moises Ballesteros and Owen Casey, if that was a right move, if they're given the chance to play on this level, right, Danny, and make an impact.
Well, right, but those are names that you're mentioning. Like, and he said guys that helped them in the second half of the season. Like, what if the name that he needed to part with was Cade Horton? Like, I think that's more what he's driving at, is that the Ben Brown, Cade Horton, guys like that. And I know that those two guys are very, very different right now. I think that Jed is being pretty kind there. And I know what I'm about to say is not terribly popular. And I've been critical of things that the Cubs front office have done in the past. But, like, I think in order for you to say the Cubs should have made a move for a starting pitcher at the deadline, you need to be able to point to me to the starting pitcher who was moved at the deadline, who was great in the second half. And when I say that to Cubs fans, they don't have answers for me. Like, he's right.
The biggest question this offseason and the one that everyone wanted to talk about today. Will the Cubs make an offer to keep Kyle Tucker?
I think that it's tough to see Kyle Tucker in a Cubs uniform beyond this year, and that really bums me out because lefty slug is, other than ace starting pitching, I think lefty slug is the 1B and maybe 2, but it's like 1A, most valuable thing in baseball, the ace shutdown pitcher. 1B is lefty power. There's just not a lot of it. It's why Juan Soto got approximately $1 gazillion.
All right, I want you to hear, this is Jed Hoyer today when he was asked the question about making an offer for Tucker.
When we take the totality of the season, he had a huge impact as we hoped he would. Obviously now we're sort of into free agency, and we'll be talking to Casey and we'll be having those conversations. And so, I mean, like I said a bunch of times during the season, like everyone can use a guy like Kyle Tucker. Everyone gets better by having a player like that, and we'll certainly be having those conversations. I think he had a good experience here for sure. I think that certainly, I think, enjoyed playing in Chicago, and I think that certainly Wrigley and our fans made a huge impact. But ultimately, I think Kyle has a big decision. I think that he's earned the right to not only be a free agent, but to be a coveted free agent. And so, I would expect that they'll play their cards kind of close to the vest. But like I said, I know he had a good experience. And like I said, I know that when we were sort of at our best, he played exceptionally well.
All right, so it sounds like Hoyer may make an offer that they consider, that the franchise considers reasonable. When Tucker spoke at his locker following the Saturday loss, he sounded like it was his last game as a Cub, and he was moving on. Let me throw these names at you, Danny, as a final question. Would you rather have a Kyle Schwarber or an Alex Bregman or a Pete Alonso or a Kyle Tucker?
Well, I mean, listen, the Cub fan in me, Kyle Schwarber is probably one of my 5 favorite Cubs of all time.
I'm with you.
Yeah, and you could pull the tapes of me on the score. That is for sure the most critical I ever was of the Cubs front office the day they non-tendered him. Like, I heard from a few people after that one. I was like, $8 million for Kyle Schwarber? His 2015 performance against the Cardinals was obviously worth $8 million. So like I definitely would love to see that reunion happen, and it would be a lot cheaper. This is a bit of a cop-out here, Lou, but I think it's just how Jed thinks, and I've talked to him enough times. Like, they're going to have a number. And if Kyle Tucker is able to be afforded for that number, they will give him that number. But if Kyle Tucker can get more than that number, he's not going to give the Cubs any sort of hometown discount and take it, which is why I ultimately think the names that you mentioned is who he's going to be shopping for. But to be clear, I'd prefer Kyle Tucker because he's the younger, better player. But my guess is that's not what happens.
You prefer Tucker over Schwarber?
No, again,
Schwarber,
the emotion of Schwarber gives me Schwarber. But Tucker is going to cost, I mean, I don't $200 million more than Kyle Schwarber. Like, I don't like, they're both lefty power guys, but just in terms of like age and all of that, I could be off on that number, but my guess is Tucker costs so much more than Schwarber does that it's a fallback plan. Is how I would frame it.
Got it. Hey, Danny, great catching up this week. Lots to talk about. Bears, Cubs. We will talk more next week. Have a great week on FS1's First Things First, buddy.
All right, thanks. Let's talk about a win over the Saints.
Yeah, let's hope so. Back